few that remain. Um, Welcome to you also, Sakura. It's good to see you again as well.
Hi, Mark Anthony. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So Rachel wanted us to start off by sharing a little bit about the Chop Art vision and what we're trying to do, our goals here with the Chop Art. So I think it'd be a good way to start that off by just mentioning some of our values here at Chop Art and what we're seeking to accomplish. With Chop Art, what we want to do is essentially give a platform for underprivileged communities to express themselves through art, through education, through communication, so that we can have positive change for social justice issues that impact people based on their gender, their race, their religion, um, their sexual orientation. We believe in equality for all, and we are going to try to promote that message by promoting the people who are involved in that fight, by promoting artists, by promoting speakers, by promoting musicians. Art comes in a lot of different forms, and we are going to try to find every avenue we can to be a platform for voices that haven't always had that platform. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that, Sakura?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, my name is Sakura. I am treasurer of the Chop Art. I'm wearing a white lace shirt, and behind me, I have a piece of George Floyd. It's mostly yellow, and it says, "The sun never sets on George Floyd." Um, so yeah, today I wanted to tell you all about the values of the Chop Art. So the Seattle Chop Art aims to empower those who are marginalized, repressed, and lack the resources they need for self-expression. Our mission is to provide art and the means to make it to those who are most affected by institutionalized inequality. We aim to support social justice through art, self-expression, and education. And for a lot of you who do know me, I care very much about, those who are houseless. So at my chop ups, I continue to provide food, water, masks, clothing, tents, and sleeping bags to those who don't have the resources to get those on their own. And we also aim to support other marginalized and repressed groups such as BIPOC, FEMS, LGBTQ, houseless, those who are traditionally repressed and marginalized by society. So we also give out art supplies and sign making materials and paint and other art supplies to those who can't afford to buy it for themselves. And so, yeah, so we really do live those values as much as we can through the events that we hold and trying to uplift BIPOC artists in particular, which a lot of the chop artists are. And yeah, that's what we aim to do, and that those are our goals and our mission.
Awesome. Thank you, Sakura. You actually just reminded me as well. I need to give a description of myself, you guys, for those of us who aren't able to see me. My name is Mark Anthony once again. I am the Chop Art president. I am 32 years old. I'm an African American male. Right now, I am wearing a shirt. For those of you who can see it, it is essentially a black woman wearing an afro. I need to hold it up a little bit higher. A black woman wearing an afro. She has a number of black historical civil rights figures making up the afro. And in her sunglasses, you can see the words "My Roots." So I felt like it was a very fitting outfit for me to wear for this event. Um, but once again, the focus of this event is actually not on us as members of the Chop Art. It is on the Chop artists and the art that they created at the place that was known as the CHOP, the Capitol Hill Organized Protests in Seattle, Washington. So we want to continue moving forward with that. We're actually going to bring up a video of our first artist. She was not able to make it with us tonight. Thank you for being with us here once again, Sakura. We'll speak to you in just a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, but yeah, our first artist we're going to be hearing from has pre-recorded a message for us. Her name is Corinne Taylor. So I'm going to turn it over and we're going to hear a little bit from Corinne. All right, how are you doing today, Corinne?
I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome. It's good to have you here. We'd like to start by getting to know a little bit about yourself. Tell us where you're from, tell us how you got involved with art and the chop, and basically, what brings you here.
Well, I am born and raised here in Washington State. I've been doing art since I'm a kid. Usually that's the case with a lot of artists.
Hmm.
But my time with Chop was by accident. I loved it because I worked right in front of Cal Anderson Park. and somebody was looking for an artist to do art, and I hadn't done art for about 8 years just because I had been in art school. Then I dropped out and I was like, oh, I don't know how to do art. But then, you know, I think I just kind of let like the system of how art school goes, that if you're not making A's, that you're not making art. So I let myself not do art for a long time, and then this it was a, I'd say, like therapeutic in a way, because it was a way for me to cope with what was going on and
Yeah.
finding out like the Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, everything. Like I was in a really weird funk, and then by doing art, it just kind of was therapeutic to me. And then when people were saying, "Oh, we need an artist," and I was like, "Well, I can do it," and then here I am. I was able
Awesome.
to do art, and yeah,
And I'm sure there's a lot of artists that were involved with the chop that felt the same way, felt like it was therapy
yep,
for them to come out and, release some of their inner emotions. How much time did you spend a lot of time around the chop area?
I did. So any time that I was able to get away from work, which was basically uh, my lunch break, I'd go out there. And the good thing is, working for who I did, it was Omabop on 11th and Olive. So I was able to, like, the owner was really understanding and just would always ask me, this seems like it's a cause that's like close to your heart. That is there anything that I can do as an owner that can help the community? So he listened to a lot of things that I had to say, and we were able to like give food out for free and stuff like that. So it was like a blessing to work for a place that let me be involved more. So
Yeah, it's always good to work for a company that can appreciate who you are and where you came from.
yeah.
So I know we're looking at one of your pieces of art here. Did you was this the only piece that you painted, or did you have multiple?
Well, I did multiple. So on the side of Hugo House, I was able to like help with the Black Lives Matter sign that was across the the building. And
Hmm.
then on the other side of the apartment building, I was able to do um, like a poem on the side, um, with some help of with other artists that I met up in that area. So I was able to like they would talk to me since I'd had I'd say I did two.
Awesome. It's very good to hear that you were actively involved with not just one piece of art but multiple pieces and other artists as well. Let's focus on this piece that we have
Yes.
a little bit because this piece is very powerful. This one was right across the street from Cal Anderson Park. I recognize this piece almost.
Yep.
I love seeing it. Um, Tell us a little bit about about this piece, about what it means to you, and who you wanted to reach with it, and what you wanted to teach them through it.
Well, the way I felt about it was I wanted to be able to put names of more people, not just George Floyd, but just to kind of get it in our brains, and anyone that would see it to not just think of what is going on as like a trend. Because I felt like that was kind of a thing where people are like, oh, Black Lives Matter, blah blah blah. But I said, but it needs to be more. We need to talk about all the people we don't know about that
Mhm.
that get killed all the time, and just with everything else. And I think I was able to let that be there, and a lot of people were able to see where I was coming from with that. Like the next day when I painted it and came to work and I saw that people put candles and everything else out there, like that was a really like emotional experience. I've like knowing that I could have an emotional connection with other people that see a piece of art and can think about what I was trying to convey was very powerful. And I think the two most like touching things that I was able to see was one of which it was a mom and her son. She tagged me in an Instagram post about it, where she was able to have a conversation with her 5-year-old son, but he didn't know what was going on, like what is going on around here, like what is this about? And then he said, "Why is this here?" And then she was able to have a conversation with him about the whole issue. And he wanted her to say every name that was on there and read it off to her. And he said he wanted to bring a candle for them. So that one was a very like touching story for me. And then another one was, I think it might have been like towards the beginning of Chaz, before it was Chop. There was a group of people across the street, and they were like talking with each other, and then they looked at it, and then they started, like two of the guys came from the group, and they started reading stuff off, and then they ran back to the car and they got a marker and they wrote down a name. So that's a name that we don't know about, you know, and they wrote it down, and then they just kind of looked, and then they like kissed it and put their hands on there, and they walked away.
You know, and I think you bring up a very good point that, you know, there's countless names that have been
Yep.
systemic racism, more than we could ever fit on one piece of art or
Exactly.
art combined. This is a systemic problem that has been going on for over 300 years.
Yep.
And you know, that's one thing about this art that I really appreciate, is that it brings to light so many names that people aren't chanting every day in the streets, that didn't get
Exactly.
coverage. Not everybody was as well known as Tamir Rice or Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin or George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, but that doesn't mean that their lives were any less. You know,
Yep.
it's important that we recognize that this issue isn't going to end just because our president is different either. This is
Exactly.
in facing and that we're going to continue to face. So I definitely appreciate all the time you spent, and, you know, adding all these other names. And, you know, it may have been people that weren't even well known to the general public, but through your art, they now have a little bit more information about these people.
Yep.
So you said that you definitely reached some of the younger audience and educating them on some of these names. Was that your intent? Was to reach for people who didn't necessarily have the education on the history of this aspect, or was it, who exactly was your target audience, you would say?
I feel like
Trying to like have them informed is actually really anybody that was walking by, because even if you are well educated on what this issue is, there is sometimes like everyone gets caught in the moment of going, oh, this is an issue we need to talk about right now because everyone else is talking about it. But then once everybody gets tired of talking about it, it kind of goes in the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted it to just be like, when the Seattle Times had taken a picture and interviewed me about it, that's what was the main thing that I told them, is there's too many names, and not to let it be a trend. It's something that we need to talk about and constantly talk about until there's a resolution to the problem.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we're in the streets chanting, no justice, no peace, right? Until this
Yep.
gets solved, we got to keep fighting.
Yep.
Um, so, you know, tell me a little bit about your understanding of what CHOP was exactly, because I know a lot of people, we had a lot of different opinions, a lot of different viewpoints on what CHOP was supposed to be, what it turned into, and what it represented. And I know there were underrepresented communities all throughout CHOP that wanted to take part in the fight for equality for all. So, you know, tell me a little bit about what that means for you.
Yep. So I think the root of what I got from Chop Chat that had happened is everybody caring for each other and making sure that everybody's taken care of, because I felt like a lot more like the homeless of Seattle were able to come to an area where they can find food, clothes,
and a lot
more homeless people in this area. Well, the thing is, that's another issue in itself, but we need to figure out like it
all different issues.
Right.
I feel like at the root of that was everybody caring for each other. And it was a beautiful thing to be a part of.
No, I completely agree. Seeing day by day how many more people were coming on a regular basis, and not just to
Yeah,
around the area, but to actively take part. You had people that were coming because they needed help, but you also had people who came because they wanted to be able to provide help to those in need. And it was just crazy seeing the way that the community and
exactly.
the larger area all came together, because it wasn't just people in just that neighborhood and just that community. You had people coming from all over that wanted to take part and wanted to be a part of the solution. Um,
Yep.
so let me ask you this. Do you think CHOP was effective in some of the goals that people had set out for in educating the public
I feel like
on issues?
it was definitely a really good educational piece because I feel like towards the beginning of it, like there's a lot of like talks happening where people can come listen and stuff. Um, did it kind of like towards the end not convey everything that, like, yeah, but that's what happens when there's a lot of people involved in
Hmm.
trying to get a message across. But at the root of it, it was a good thing. So,
Yeah, I completely agree. You had so many different groups coming in from different areas, different backgrounds, and it was a little bit of a mixture of so many different ideas that it was impossible to just pin it down on just
exactly.
ideas. But I do think that everybody that was there had the same type of idea in mind, that we need to keep fighting for equality. We need to keep fighting for a positive future.
yep,
Nobody should be judged
yep,
on their gender, on their race, on their religion, on
religion, everything.
yeah, any of that. People should be judged on what comes from the inside. Um, so being a part of the CHOP like you were for so many days, um, some of the people that you met probably came from a different area or background than you yourself. How would you say it was interacting with so many different people?
I would say that it was nice.
Conversations that I wouldn't, somebody who hasn't had to deal with these issues or like someone that has never had to deal with any kind of racism whatsoever. And then they're like, oh, well, I've never had to deal with that. Like, tell me more about that. It's like, well, there's a lot of different conversations, like just people that like quit their jobs to come out there and help out. And like, it was a beautiful thing. Like just at the root of it, beautiful. And I wish that like the world could just be a little bit more like Chop.
Yeah, that conversation corner that we had there definitely had an impact on a lot of people. I think just being able to come out and talk to people that came from different spaces than they did. Um, Also, I saw that we made a lot of progress with some of the homeless community that have been there for a while at CHOP. I mean, there were some people who came there, looking for any semblance of hope, and I feel like a lot of people found it from taking part
Yep.
in that activism. There were people who, for the most part, changed their lives around during CHOP. People who were marginalized on the fringes of society, who all of a sudden found a community that they could
Yep.
be part of. Um, are there any other social issues that you would like to bring to light that may not have been mentioned in this interview so far?
Not like one particular thing like sticks in my mind, but I feel like as a whole, like if people just have like that like heart of just caring, like deeply caring for what other people are going through, I think that a lot of different problems that are happening right now wouldn't happen. And we just need more people to care.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Um, and it's sad to think about that. As many names as there are on this piece of art that you created, there have been more names.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. Hmm.
Yeah, it's just a little tiny bit, and there's been more names added even since this was created. This is an issue that we're going to continue to be facing for the foreseeable future. It's not something that's just going to die off just because we got a change in office. So
Yep.
we appreciate you coming on board and sharing with us your experiences in CHOP and exactly what your art represents and what it meant to you. And I hope that we'll continue to see more of your art and continue to have you speaking on what your art represents through the CHOP art. So thank you again, Corinne.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody. Once again, that was Corinne Taylor. She was not able to join us today. She had prior engagement, but I still appreciate the time that she did take to record that message for us and share us a little bit about her feelings on the CHOP and her art. So our next artist that we're going to be speaking to is Perry Rhoden. If we could get you to join us, Perry. Awesome. Welcome, Perry.
Thank you. Thank you.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm nervous, I won't lie. So I'm just going to get that out and hopefully be less nervous now that I said it.
Don't worry. I'm sure you'll do great. I'm sure you'll do
Thank
great.
you.
So first, to start off by having you, describe yourself to us and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Perry Rhoden. I'm an abstract mixed media artist. For the visual representation of what I look like, I'm a black woman. I'm 29. I'm a beautiful black woman, 29. I am wearing glasses. My hair is curly up in a bun. I'm wearing a red sweatshirt from my alma mater, Howard University. I'm in my studio right now, and behind me are two images, not images, but two abstract paintings. The one on the right, I don't even know how to describe it. It's beautiful. And then the one on the left is a picture of a woman with an extended neck, very colorful, very bold, lots of texture. There's glitter, acrylic paint in there that's dripping with mixed media and all of that goodness. So
Awesome. Thank you for that, Perry. Uh, let's see. So I guess let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the CHOP. We can see a picture of your art here, but I want to hold off on the actual art piece you created first, and let's talk about what brought you down to CHOP.
yeah, totally. So unlike some of the other folks here, I was not as involved with the CHOP. At the time of last summer, I was living at home with my family. And so as it relates to COVID and safety, and then also just being really honest, um, being Black in Seattle, and very visibly Black in Seattle at that time, I was very cautious. I still am very cautious about where I go, but I did not feel safe in most places, and I only felt safe at home. So I tuned into the updates of the CHOP via social media and in the media. So at this point in time, two artists, Zakiyah Ward and Joey Nix, both local Seattle artists, were coordinating the Black Lives Matter mural on 12th, 11th and 12th, between 11th and 12th on Pine Street, right in front of the taco spot and Molly Moon's. And so Zakiyah sent a message out on social media of just anyone who's interested. And so I responded to that and then was pulled into an Instagram group thread with all of the artists who responded and who also were interested in being a part of the mural. And it really just kind of took off from there. Specifically, I designed the letter C. And so the image that's on the screen right now, this is the second edition of the Black Lives Matter mural. The original first one that took place was a slightly different, actually, I think I have that, was a slightly different design, but the one that's on camera now is what exists now and is now a permanent landmark in Seattle.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah, it's a very famous image now. I'm sure a lot of people have seen, and the way you guys redid it makes the colors pop even more. The way they relaminated or whatever they did, it looks even more beautiful now than after it had been all, a little bit torn up immediately after chop. Um,
yeah,
so let's talk about your specific letter here. Can you give us a short description of what the letter looks like for the audience that can't see it first off?
yeah, of course. So this letter here, it's the letter C. There are one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, 8 colors, and they're broken up into like equal compartments of the C in like a horizontal line pattern. I don't really know. I'm kind of I blocked out the letters. There you go. I blocked out 7 different components of the C. And so each kind of section has a base color, and it's almost like it's a rainbow from like a bright yellow tangerine to like a citrus orange, and then there's like a blood orangey reddish color. There's a bright baby pink, a really deep purple. There's an electric blue. The next color is like a seafoam green, and then the last is honey, like a honeydew or like a spring green. On top of that, I've drawn or I painted these like abstract curvilinear squiggles in black, and so it's just a really nice kind of bold print on top of those colors, and sort of gives like a tree vine or like roots of a tree. It kind of looks like that on top of the sea.
Awesome, that was a great description. It was very detailed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So let me ask you, with this being, as you mentioned, a landmark in Seattle, basically now, was that a one of the targets you had when you guys were doing this mural? Was that, did you know your reach was going to be that vast?
No, honestly, I don't even still think I grasp the reach of this mural. When we did it, it was very much with the intention of it being temporary. And I mean, I think from my understanding of the chop, it was an occupied protest. So under my understanding, it was even the chop itself wasn't going to last forever. So the artwork that we created was really in this like guerrilla style. Let's just do it. And if it, fades away, or if it's trampled, or the city comes in and like sweeps it up, we were prepared for that. And so now that it's a permanent mural, I think that it, I don't really have the words yet. I think it's really awesome, and I think that I hope that what we created, I hope that when folks look at it, they don't see just one, like the monolith of what they think black is, but that each letter truly represents, and not just black, because there are BIPOC artists that were part of this as well. But I hope that folks can see it and really see the individuality of us all, and how when we all come together, we make one unified statement.
Yeah, a very powerful statement. I feel like I should give a little bit more background on this piece too, because we need to really give justice to what this piece was. I was here when you guys were actually the first time you did it, when it was still just white letters before you guys had even painted everything. And we knew
Yeah,
then it was going to have a huge impact, having the words Black Lives Matters right here on this street that is one of the central streets of the Chop Art. Or of the Chop protest, I should say, of the Chop protest. It's right there next to Cal Anderson, right down the street from the East Precinct. And everybody knew that this was going to be huge, but nobody knew it was going to be as big as it was. Not
yeah.
the artists, not the people that were there to witness it either. So thank you guys once again for the history you made. Um,
Thank you.
so let me ask you a little bit more about the social issues that led to CHOP and your feelings on them. Yeah, the Black Lives Matters movement, the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor deaths, and the protests that followed. Um, Equality for all. You mentioned that you have a lot of different BIPOC artists that helped on this mural. Uh, basically what I'm asking you is what made you want to be a part of what Chop was? What made you want to come out and support this?
Yeah. I feel like I also just want to add on that in addition to Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, there were a ton of people who were also killed by police and whose names were not mentioned and probably who will never be mentioned. Specifically, a lot of Black transgendered men and women, and just transgendered people, I should say. And so I think that what made me want to come out, I mean, and if we think back to this time period of COVID and of 2020, you know, there were a lot of protests that were happening. There was a lot of police force that was happening too, and so I went to a couple protests, but I even just being at some of them, I just was like, what are we actually like? What are we really doing? Like we're marching, but I also just felt like for some of the people as I kind of wove through the crowd, it seemed more of like a facade, like not truly that they knew the names that they were chanting. And so I wanted to be very intentional about how I spent my time and what I wanted to say with my art. And what made me want to come out to Chop was not only the opportunity, but I knew that like I knew that no matter where it was that I was going, I knew that no matter where it was that I was going at that time, that like safety was always going to be a concern. But I figured that if I could come out to do this mural, and I knew that there were at least 12 other people who knew that I was going to be there, who had my back, who basically I tried to just compartmentalize safety as best as I could to get in and try to say something. And I think that with my first image, and I'm not sure if I provided that specific image to you all, I probably should have done that. But the first image was based on a previous painting that I had created back in 2015 called Spotty Yachty Dope Delicious. And that painting was very representative of, I'd say, me realizing the power of my art. And it was very like non-representational, and there were a lot of layers and colors similar to this piece and like this blue part here. Um, and I think that as an abstract artist, I sometimes don't have the words. I don't have the language to really say how I feel. And so I wanted to just fully express myself onto this mural in this way with all of these amazing other artists, some who I've admired for years, others who I've never worked with before, some I've never heard of before. But so that's what got me to come out of my house and triple mask up and just kind of go for it.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on today and sharing that message with us, Perry, and you know, your experience and making this piece of history that you created. I want to thank you again once again, and we look forward to working with you again in the future with the Chop Art. So hopefully we'll hear
Thank
from
you
you
so
again soon.
much. I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Once again, that was Perry Rhoden. That was one of the artists who helped create the Black Lives Matters mural that is now a piece of Seattle history. Our next artist is going to be John Top. John, if we could bring you on.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Hey, John, thank you. So we have your artwork here. I'm going to let you go ahead and take a moment to explain what your piece is. Um, well, actually, no, before we do that, let's have you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself. Um, Start off with your first name, your last name, and then tell us about your experience with art, your relation to the Seattle area, and you know anything else you'd like to share with us about your personal history.
Yeah, my name is John Top. I live in Bellingham. I've actually never lived in Seattle. I am a man. I am wearing a jean jacket, and I have long brown hair and a braid. Um, and I, mm, I personally, I kind of want to start off by acknowledging myself being on Duwamish land, and I personally want to really thank the entire team that has put this together. This is an incredible opportunity, and I am beyond grateful. I'm at a loss for words, really, and I really appreciate it. I've been a sculpture artist for about 3 years now, in all sorts of different types of media, and yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, let's start with this piece here that we have on screen. Let's have you start off by giving us a short description of the piece and tell us, how you came to create it and where it was at Chop and things like that.
Yeah. So my piece was, I forget actually how tall it was. When I first drew it, it was 35 feet tall. I think it scaled down to about 27 feet to like top to bottom. It's a black power fist. It's made out of Douglas fir, and the inside pieces that fill out the frame of the fist are an old fence from a friend of mine that I just happened to be tearing down a couple weeks before. And it's held together with actually I have one of the screws that hold it together. It's about $800 worth of these things um, blasted together, and then I burnt all of the pieces of wood with a flamethrower, roofing torch, whatever you want to call it, to weatherproof them so they would resist mold and water. And it was originally supposed to go on the pump house that's just a little bit west of the main baseball field. It might be east, I forget. And then eventually I worked with the city to move it onto the baseball field, and then it finally lived in front of the dome, the sort of catcher's dome. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember trying to get this the structure up on that water pump structure you said, and yeah, that was a lot of people, and we still couldn't get it up there. So as you mentioned, this eventually got its final home at the Cal Anderson baseball field, right next to the dugout area, I guess is what you would call it, or home plate. I guess I should say would be a better description. Home plate.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. Tell us about what inspired you to create this piece. Like, what about the movement, or what exactly brought you out and made you think I want to make this and this huge sculpture that became such a huge symbol at Chop? Like that was one of the first things you saw when you came down.
Thank you. It's kind of funny. It was my birthday, and I was sitting there with my roommate, and I was kind of just like sitting there, just like donating money to any fund that I could find at all. And after a certain amount of time, I was like, wait a minute, I'm a carpenter, I'm an artist, I should go do something. And I reached out to a friend of mine who was working at the garden there at the time, and I was like, hey, can I come build something? And they were like, 100%, come do anything. You'd be super useful. And I just wanted to be useful. And in the next like hour and a half, I just started drawing on my computer. And then I was like, wait, I'm going to make a black power fist, right? Of course. Like you're like, duh, we're missing a monument here. We need a giant thing to be like, this is why we're here. And it was around the same time that there was a lot of monuments getting torn down across the U.S. A lot of Confederate monuments, an endless amount that got destroyed. And I figured if there's some empty space for a monument, maybe we should start building new ones. So the next day, I ended up buying as many of these as I physically could and a bunch of wood, and went out there and built the fest.
Awesome. And yeah, that fist lasted through the end of Chop, didn't it? It was there the whole time, was it not?
I think it was the last thing to leave the site. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was when I did take it down, because I took it down personally. There was nothing but police and city workers when I walked in there, which is the scariest thing I've ever done. Yeah, and next to attempting to raise it at the pump house, that was the second scariest.
Man, that was a struggle.
Yeah, sometimes things don't just work out, but luckily someone donated me a crane. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing that. I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you, Mayhem, if you're watching out there somewhere. Really, you gave me a crane.
Mayhem with
Yeah,
Riot Kitchen.
yeah, with Riot Kitchen. Yes,
Awesome.
yeah, yeah. Huge thank you to her. Yeah.
Yeah, Mayhem's amazing. That's a great story to hear. I didn't even know that story. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I had a bullhorn from one of the people that was there, a megaphone, and I was like, we can't do this safely. Does anybody have a crane? And then someone actually raised their hand. They're like, yeah, I have a crane. Yeah, yeah, it was
That's
pretty
kind of
great.
how it
Yeah.
all came together at Chop, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Kind of
I
how
had
it all
no
happened.
expectations. I when I started, I assumed I was going to be arrested either immediately or soon after I built it. Uh, um,
So let me ask you, when you were building this, who was the audience you were hoping to reach? Was it just supposed to be just, people that were coming through the Chop? Did you expect it to get the exposure that it did and reach so many different people?
I never, I really wanted to avoid an expectation. I didn't want to make the piece about me, and I didn't want to make the thing about me. I really wanted to be as separated as I possibly could. It really just to let it be that piece, let it be a monument, let it stand for what it stands for. Um, it's kind of interesting. My target audience was all of the people I usually build with. People like construction workers, like people in the community, regular old just blue collar workers. So many of them have the ability to create incredible things at such a large scale. And I work with a lot of production people and designing huge, super extravagant events and stages and all sorts of stuff. And I really wanted to tell them that they were capable of committing to this movement, like build something of worth, build something that's going to last, build a new monument to the lives that we've lost and the ones that we might if we don't change how our systemic sort of situation is, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to reach out to the community. I wanted everyone around there to see it. Obviously, like you can stare at tents and you can stare at cop cars and protests and all that, but this is uh, much more scary to them, much more scary to the community. I had to deal with a lot of people that lived in the surrounding area that were concerned because this was like a threat to them. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that, John. Let's see. So while we're on the subject, tell us a little bit more about your feelings on the movement behind CHOP, on your thoughts on Black Lives Matters, on your thoughts of police brutality, on your thoughts of you know, BIPOC people in general, the fact that we're still on indigenous lands. Can you share us a little bit more about your personal connection with those issues?
Um, you know, I think the best way to sum it up is that if there is anybody who has had the privilege of not having, I don't know, to be personally attacked by the government, by the police, by a coworker, by anybody for the color of their skin or for whatever denomination that they have, you have like a civic duty to stand up for those who can't. And I got to meet a lot of those people who can't. I see those people who can't every day. Um, and I think that's enough. Like it is imperative for people to care for each other. If that's not the first thing that we're trying to do, then like what are we doing? It's
Hmm.
we everybody's at a loss right now, right? And we can either focus on people who need the help, or we can focus on the people who have been helping themselves and putting everyone else down since the beginning of whenever. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And it's important that we remember that everybody can help in their own way. Not everybody's going to help the same way.
absolutely.
Um, that's why we have the artists here to show the way that they were able to impact this movement in ways that other people couldn't. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, making food is an art, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Being present, being a body is an art.
It
It's
is.
all to some form. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all about us contributing in our own ways, coming together for the greater good.
And
Um,
and 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 to say one more thing on that really fast is that people really doubt themselves with their power. We all have this innate thing inside of us that is so strong that we just ignore. And if you just go out there and if you went to Chop and you did a thing, you made art. You helped this movement and the root of the movement, which is yeah, yeah.
you are completely right. And once again, we want to try to promote art in all the different forms that it comes in. So thank you for mentioning that, John. I do want to actually bring up one more thing. I know a lot of people had reached out to me and they had asked about what happened to that giant fist. And I know you and I had a little bit of a conversation over the last few days about, if we could contact that piece of art that was being held by the city. Were you able to get in contact with anybody and figure out where the art is?
Not yet. Uh, I have a lot of hope that it's sitting in a city yard somewhere.
Okay.
I effectively what happened is all the contacts that I had made when I was building the fist and all the people that I was in contact when I was at Chop, because I was only there for about a week and a half. I was just building that, and then I had other personal things show up, the COVID fear and all sorts of stuff. So I got to get out of there pretty fast, unfortunately. They gave me about like 2 hours notice to come take it apart, and then put it in the hands of people that I didn't really get to exchange information with. I had some like point of contact people, but for the most part, I don't know where it is. Yeah, I
Okay.
hope I can find it soon.
I
Yeah,
do
I
know
think.
I spoke to a city parks and recs employee just the other day, and he told me that he
Yeah,
didn't know who to get in contact with about finding it. So I'll need to send you another email and see
please
if we
do.
can
Yeah,
see if we can
I'm
get you
certain
in touch with.
it's sitting there waiting to be reassembled. Yeah, I still got all the screws I need to put it back together.
Awesome. All
Yeah,
right. Well, thank you for your time, John. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story about building this wonderful monument that was there pretty much the whole time at Chop. Something that is in everybody who came through. I'm sure it's still in the back of their minds. Like this was a huge piece of imagery to just have right there in the middle of Cal Anderson. So thank you.
yeah. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate the time, and thank you everyone for watching.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, John. We're gonna move on over to our next artist, you guys. Our next artist we have coming on is another member of Chop Art. Her name is Sakura Schlegel. Sakura, if we can have you come on camera.
Hey, Mark Anthony.
Hey, Sakura, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We're getting through this event. I was really nervous at the start, but it seems like it's going fine so far. So
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
thank you. So let's start off by we already got a bit of an introduction from you. Um, but let's go on ahead and remind everybody. Can you give us a short introduction about your experience with art and the chop?
Yeah, for sure. So, briefly before I start, I want to give a little description of the piece behind me. The piece is on 1/2 inch plywood from the chop. It's 4 by 6 feet tall. It's a portrait of George Floyd in a black hoodie, and the background is yellow, and the purple type around it says "The sun never sets" on George Floyd, and he has red paint at the neck. Um, and so, yeah, sorry, what was the question? My beginning of the involvement with the chop
With the
art?
chop art, yep,
Yeah,
and the chop, the art at chops in general. Yep.
awesome. Yeah. So when I was first at home when I saw on the news that the police cruiser lit on fire, and I was watching the tanks rolling down downtown Seattle, and I saw the curfew and I saw everything that happened. And at the time, I was living with my grandmother, so I didn't feel comfortable going to protests with large amounts of people. So what I started doing is I woke up at 4 and the curfew lifted at 5, and I just went around downtown Seattle and photographed for about 3 hours. And so every morning I would wake up early and I would go early before anyone was awake, and I would go and photograph everything that happened the night and the day before. So I was doing that for about a week, just over a week, and then the chop was formed. And I met a lot of protesters that way. I met a lot of the mutual aid peeps that way. I met a lot of artists that way. And Josh, who is an artist, I met like right at the beginning of the chop, and he was the one who was working with the art co-op in the chop. And he's the one who invited me to paint a barricade in the chop. So when I first came, that was the day after the shooting. The first shooting had happened the night before. And so I came in, and Aaron was sitting at the Chop Art Co-op and told me what had happened. And it just was a very somber moment, because it just sort of reminds us why we were all there and why we continue to be there. And so that was the morning that I started on the George Floyd piece that you can see behind me.
Awesome. And so, can you describe this piece to us for those of us who can't actually see the piece? I know you have some words written on it. I want to make sure everybody has a good.
So the words say here, the sun never sets on, and then George Floyd's portrait is in the middle. And when I started this piece, I believe it was the same day as the summer solstice. So what I did was I printed out a picture of George Floyd, and I printed out a picture of a Woodstock poster because I wasn't actually sure how big the barricade would be. And I needed type that would sort of stretch and that I could sort of, stretch or contract to fit the space that I had because I didn't actually know how big the board would be. So the type is based on a Woodstock poster from the 60s. And then because it was a summer solstice, I wanted to include the sunshine shining on George Floyd. And so his portrait is in the middle. And it took about, I would come to the chop around 8 and I would usually paint until the sun went down. So around like 8 or 9. So there was often like 8, 10, or even 12-hour days painting in the chop. But yeah, so this piece took, I want to say, like a week to a week and a half to do.
And you had another piece that was a similar piece that had Breonna Taylor instead of George Floyd on it, right? And it also said, what were the words on that piece as well? Do you have?
Yeah, I can actually show you. I'm just going to fold this down here. So I have the Breonna Taylor piece behind the George Floyd piece. And this piece says, "The moon never sets on Breonna Taylor." And there's a portrait of Breonna Taylor in the middle. And there's gold paint around her hair to differentiate her from the background. And so this was on, the George Floyd piece was on 12th and Pine facing the East Precinct. And Breonna Taylor was on the other side of that same barricade facing out from 12th and Pine.
Awesome. And so knowing these two people that you decided to make these paintings after, what inspired you to choose these two people, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor?
Yeah, so I think probably everyone who is here has seen the video that Darnella Frazier took. And it just felt like a defining moment in our history where everyone could physically see the violence and like the absolute awful moment, and it was just captured there for everyone to see. And there's just I'm sure everyone here has probably watched that video, but it's absolutely horrific to watch. And I mean, it's crazy because a lot of people are like, well, we didn't see this coming. And I'm like, this country has had 400 years of systemic racism. We've removed the native peoples from their land, and and pretty much the white colonizers genocided them. And a lot of a lot of Black Americans, their ancestors were slaves and they were taken from their country and taken here for their labor. And you think of the Japanese American internment camps and the Chinese railroad workers, and white supremacy has always been at the core of our nation's history. And I think it's important for people to remember that this doesn't just go away because we're marching on the street. This is happening all over every day. And that's a reason that we are trying to make a sort of positive change around this. And it's also why I feel so passionately about the chop art, because I think it's so important that people take care of it, that it's still seen by everyone, and that people remember that we're here and we're not going to go away just because the chop went away. And the chop art is still vitally important to the movement.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Sakura. So let's see. I also wanted to ask, what impact do you think the chop had on these protests? We've seen protests all around the country for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Do you think chop had a different impact than some of these other protests?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously it was iconic because the precinct was abandoned by its own cops. And you sort of got the impression that they really wanted us to burn it down, but that didn't happen. And the doors weren't locked; they just boarded it over with plywood, so people could go in, but they chose not to. And you know, there were so many elements of the chop that I think were just so beautiful. Seeing that candlelight vigil on 12th and Pine and the growing list of names that were killed during the following days and weeks and months after George Floyd was murdered. The decolonization cafe, riot kitchen, all of the free food, the medical, the clothes, the couches for people to sleep on, the community support, the de-escalation, um, the chop art, I think was a very powerful experience. Like, people were drawn to it. People drove and flew from all across the country, and in some cases even across the world, to see it for themselves. And that's how powerful this place was. So I want people to remember, like, it's so easy to focus on what the cops say or what the city says or on the violence, but there were so many aspects of the chop that people had no idea about because no one in the media ever covered any of that. And so that's why we continue to hold these events. That's why we continue to bring out the chop art for people to see, because we want people to remember all of those different aspects of the chop that were so powerful.
Well said, Sakura. Very well said. So let's see. I do have one more question for you. Are there any other closing thoughts or ideas you would like to share before we?
Yeah, I sort of wanted to give a shout out because I made friends with Alice Cooper and Alice Cooper's daughter, Sally. And so she came up to me and I asked her if she had ever painted before. And she said no. So I said, you know, I'm painting the sunshine around George Floyd. Why don't you grab a paintbrush and help me? And so she was helping me paint the yellow in between the letters for a while. And then she took some red on her brush and she started adding it here to the neck. And, you know, I wasn't mad. I just said, you know, why are you adding the red? And she says, there needs to be blood on it. And keep in mind, Sally is a 6-year-old Black girl who was living in the chop with her mother. And she needed this painting more than I did. And that was very clear to me. Like, she had so much to say and she had never been given the chance to paint before. And that was one of the first things that she ever did with her first painting. And so I was obviously, I was just like, my heart just broke in a million pieces in that moment. And so when I started working on the hoodie, I decided to keep Sally's piece right there, just as a reminder of like why it is that we do what we do and why it is that art is so important to the movement. So yeah, actually the youngest chop artist ever was Sally, Alice Cooper's daughter. She's 6 years old, and she helped me with my George Floyd painting here.
Awesome. That was a very touching story, Sakura, and thank you for taking the time to not only create this art, but also to come here and speak with us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our final artist, everyone. This is an artist who is well known around Seattle. He goes by Henry. So Henry, if we can bring you on board, there we are. Welcome, Henry.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
Oh, no, we appreciate having you and all the many pieces of art that you created. Well, first off, let's have you start off by telling us a bit about yourself. Don't forget to give us a physical description for those of us who can't see you as well.
Yeah, I'm Henry, or Ryan Henry Ward. Different. Henry's my artist name. I signed my art with that, so it's probably what I'm most recognized as. And I'm a white male, and I have brown hair and a brown beard that are, maybe 65% gray. Actually, I'm 45, and wearing a brown shirt, a Citizen Cope shirt. He's a musician that I like a lot, and I think I connect with him. I wanted to wear this shirt because I connect with him because he's a white male as well that I feel like has a good comprehension of systemic racism and speaks it out in his art and things like that. And I identify with him. But yeah, I'm behind me is some of my art. I'm in my studio in my hometown of Enumclaw right now, and this is kind of my chill zone. So
awesome. And I actually want to mention something that you just spoke on about you being inspired by other white male artists that have similar feelings on social issues that you do. It's very important that we remind everybody that CHOP is about equality for all, and equality is regardless of race, gender, anything like that. And we want equality for everybody. That means it's going to take everybody to be a part of that equality. And we need to remember that we have had allies in this fight for equality since the beginning. There would not be an Underground Railroad without white people. There would not have been legislation being passed without white people that were in the position to pass that legislation. So let's not forget that we have always had allies in this fight, and we had many white allies at CHOP. Seattle is one of the whitest cities in America, and we had a very strong showing of support from members of the white community, from the Asian community, from the Indian community, from the Black community, from all over. It was a really a melting pot of different people. So thank you for taking the time to be here, Henry. Um, Let me start off by asking, how much time did you spend around CHOP? Were you there often? Were you?
Yeah, before I started doing the art, I actually was part of the protest, and I was part of the protest before it moved up to Capitol Hill when it was down at Westlake area, and kind of the initial kind of growth of it there, and then you know, I the art came a little bit later. Um, at first, I was just like participating in the protests and having conversations and talking with people and sitting out in the field and engaging in all sorts of conversations and just being a watcher, listener, and observer. And I feel like um, that's kind of as a member of the more privileged community and being white, that my role really is to first listen and to acknowledge what I hear and to believe what I hear when someone's talking about their experience. And so that was my first approach to the CHOP experience, was to first be an observer and listener before I just jumped in and started slamming my art around.
You came to the CHOP to take part, not to take over, basically, correct?
Yeah.
You came there with the right spirit. As I'm sure you know, we had a lot of different groups that came in the CHOP and they didn't carry that same spirit, unfortunately. But it's the people who did come there with the right intentions, the right ideas, that made the biggest impact. So thank you. Um, so tell us about this piece here that we have in front of us. I'm going to let you give us a moment to give us a short description of it, and then give us some details on what inspired you to create this piece, what it represents, who you wanted to reach through it.
Yeah, so I just showed up. I had a few friends that like were encouraging me to come do my art there, and Aaron Demuth and my friend Bashir and some artists from the Rise and Unite group, and some other friends, and just people that I knew through social media and stuff. A lot of people were like, you should really do your art there. And so I showed up with a backpack full of spray paint and just kind of checked out some spots that I thought would be good. And I found some spots. I think for me as a muralist, I think location is really important. And I was thinking of what spots would be really visible for the children that were there, because that was one of the things that I had observed and noticed was how many families were there and how many little kids, and how different the experience was from watching Tucker Carlson talk about what was going on. It's like you go experience something all day, and then you go home and like, oh, you got to watch Fox News, because I like seeing all points of view, and it's just like, wow, that is really not what's happening. Okay. So I chose these spots that I felt like could really engage children. So there was one spot I had that was kind of by the arts and craft booth, and then this one was kind of more out in the middle, but eye level for 5-year-olds to look at. And so I was thinking of like, if I was 5 years old and walking through this zone, what what would grab my attention, and what would I go, oh, I like that, and I would want to like ask my parents about. So so this is a quadrupus. It's a four-legged octopus, and but it's symbolic of the octopus, and which is something that's part of our bioregion and an important part of it, and lives in the Puget Sound. And so this one's an orange one with a blue black background, and it says BLM on its forehead, and then has a spiral, which is the path of the sun, underneath that. And then it says end systemic racism. And there's some white swirls and some movement and bubbles, and just really calm, present eyes, just like a neutral kind of a neutral kind of look, like you're welcome and present here, kind of look.
Awesome.
On it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you made a few statements that I want to unpack there. First off, let me say that I too watch Tucker Carlson because it is important to educate yourself on what the other side is saying. Yeah. But we also need to understand that right-wing media was portraying Chop in a certain image that wasn't necessarily accurate. I can remember seeing one person particularly who had recorded a video of being inside the Chop, and in the video he's saying that behind him everything is on fire and there's anarchy and terrorism everywhere. But in the same video behind him, you can see families walking through, like strolling their kids and their pets. And so, just the fact that you knew that there was enough children in this area that they needed to have something that they could relate to, and took the time to create this piece, really volumes. And for those of you who don't know, this was one of the pieces that was painted on the barricades that were around the Chop area. Am I correct, Henry?
Yep. It's one of the barricades. Yeah.
And judging by the pictures in the background, I think it was right down the street from the precinct, was it not? So it was in a very centerish type of area. Yeah. So a lot of people saw this. So let me ask you this. You said that your target audience was children. What were you hoping to teach children through this?
Well, I was just hoping to get more of a conversation going with children and adults. I don't really aim to like teach as much as like, well, here's a piece that we can have a collaborative communication about. You know what I mean? And because the kids see this, they know this information. They go to school. They feel from a very young age, they feel the pains of racism. They feel the pains of all sorts of things that our culture impacts them with. And so having that, being able to have that conversation with your community when you're 5 years old, and this stuff is like not something that we're gonna put away anymore. Like we're all gonna talk about it, and we're gonna include everybody in the conversation. And for me, as a visual artist and a part of the community of Seattle, that's always been my aim, is like including children in the conversation of public art. And these kids see my murals in their grade schools and they have a connection with them, and then they come out to an event like this and they're like, what do those words mean? And then that conversation has started, and they're like, oh yeah, I experienced that as well, or whatever. And the kids have just as much to teach us as we have to teach them. I think that's kind of what it's about.
Right, because a young child seeing this, it's possible they may have never even heard the word systemic racism before. So this is something that now seeing this, it almost forces a conversation between a child that's interested and a parent that's there with them. So thank you for having that piece of art and having it in such a central position at Sharp for so many people to see it. I do want to ask you your thoughts on anything else you would like to share regarding social issues or injustices, any other marginalized groups you would like to, you know, mention while we have the opportunity here to give a platform to those who haven't typically received one.
Yeah, I guess for me, when I think of systemic racism, and that's kind of what this, the words in this piece are about. Like, um, we can we're all affected by this idea emotionally, whether you think it exists or you don't think it exists. Whatever your belief around it is, we're still being impacted by the idea of it. And but there's some things that are really like not subjective about it, like that there's more, you know, there's more people of color, there's more black people that are incarcerated, percentage wise, than white people, and but in our country, there's more white people by percentage than people of color and black people. And there's just some basic facts that you can look at, regardless of your beliefs, and you can pinpoint that, like, this systemic racism is real, and so that can, like, help people that are challenged, within themselves. And I think, as a white person, like, I think a lot of other white people like me, get kind of confused whether it's real or not, because we're not having that experience. And so just looking, I think, I think, if I can talk to, those people that read like me, that you can transcend that confusion just by looking at the facts, and looking at some of those statistics, and go to a prison and walk and visit it, and see what's going on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I completely agree. And we got to remember a lot of it starts with education. A lot of it starts with us finding out information that we weren't available to, we didn't know before. And
right.
learning doesn't stop at any age, and it starts at a very young age. So once again, thank you for taking the time to reach out to the youngest audiences and find something that they could grasp onto, remember, and relate to. So thank you
Yeah,
again.
and it's kind of, you don't have to, like, know everything, and you don't have to have it all figured out to, like, start this conversation with people. Like, I
Hmm.
think a lot of people are scared to have the conversation because they don't feel like they have all the knowledge, and they're going to be embarrassed to talk about it. But I think it's good to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers and all the information, and just begin and engage in this conversation with people, and reach out to people that have different experiences than you've had, and listen and believe them.
I completely agree. Thank you, Henry.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. We're gonna actually take a few minutes to have a Q&A section. So if I can get all the artists to come back on and turn their cameras and microphones on, we're gonna have a couple questions for you guys here. Let's see. Looks like we're still waiting on a. Looks like we got everybody back here. Awesome. So the first question I have is from Matt Schlegel. He has a question for Henry. Henry, why did you choose to use four legs on the quadrupus?
Oh, it's just it's just a character I developed early on, and so it's actually just part of my character base, is this quadrupus, and it's kind of in a lot of my other murals, and it's um, probably based in my laziness to, well, it's easier to do four than eight. um, is kind of probably where it started, but then it, like, has just become this character that a lot of people know, and I identify as one of my characters. So
Awesome. Let's see. I also see another question that Stephanie Johnson Tolliver asked. I'm going to go ahead and respond to this one as well. She said, will you talk about the Chop artist's vision for sharing the catalog art Visually, the art is a call to action, public art that you don't want people to turn away from, installations, more pop-ups. Stephanie, we actually do have a number of upcoming projects we're looking into. One of the biggest issues, as I'm sure you know, is that with the pandemic, we've had a little bit of trouble finding places that we could hold in-person exhibits. But we are looking into ways to display art with Parks and Recs. We are looking into trying to contact as many artists as we can to bring them in for future projects with Chop Art and any other collaborations and exhibitions that pop up. We're interested in those opportunities as well. Once again, it's just been with the pandemic, it's kind of set everything back for the immediate future, but we are still actively trying to get this art out and shown to as many people as possible.
Oh, yeah, Mark Anthony. Can I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are possibly going to be collaborating with John Mitch. We've been talking with him about having a possible Chop Art gallery at 11th and Pine, which would be amazing since he's right where Chop all happened, right at his doorstep. And then also, I believe Don Daly, who's helping us work with the Chop Art, is also curating an upcoming exhibition in the BAM. So I think I've been talking to her about possibly building one of like a chop box for the BAM exhibition with my Floyd and Taylor pieces. So we're still trying to get the message out there, right? We're still trying to show the art. The easiest way to see it is I do chop ups every week where I bring the chop art out. And then I also hand out art supplies and clothes and food and water and masks and whatnot. So that's like the easiest and free way to see the art is just to come to one of the chop ups that I do every week.
Awesome. And do we have another question? Anybody? Let's see here. Next one is from Matt Schlegel once again. He wants to ask Perry about the other location that your work inspired. For instance, there was a BLM mural on the street in front of our city hall where he lives. So he would like to know of your feelings on other art that your art inspired by creating that mural, it sounds like.
I'm trying to understand the question.
So apparently it sounds like to me like there's another BLM mural
Mm-hmm.
in front of the city hall where he lives at.
Okay.
And he would just like to get your feelings on how your work inspired other work, I think.
Oh, okay. I mean, if that's the question, I'm here for it. I think that, like, I mean, art inspires more art. And I think that as long as, like, folks are doing the work in addition to creating Black Lives Matter, like, murals or using the phrase or whatever that may be, like, I support it. And I think it's super cool. And I think that anytime that I'd love to see it. If you can say what city or like where I can find it and see an image, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I'm here for it.
Yeah, Matt, if you can you share that location in the chat so we can actually get some more information on it? Because I wasn't aware of another Black Lives Matter mural in the area either.
Yeah, this is my dad. He lives in Palo Alto.
Oh, okay. Hi, Dad.
All right, let's see. Let's go on to the next question. This one is from someone named What Do the Numbers Mean? It is for John Top. He asks, do you feel that the social issues have helped you broach the barrier of private to public art? And do you have any plans in the works for the future?
I don't have any hard plans just yet. I mean, given that I don't know where the fist is right now, I'm not really at liberty to be able to determine its future. But it did give me a lot of information on how to deal with the city and how to communicate with other people that are involved with the space that I'm occupying, to be able to create something on a much larger scale. So with that in mind, hopefully the city gives it back and wants to put it somewhere, or somebody wants the fist, or I can use it in some sense to further the general agenda of Black Lives Matter, right? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Let's see. I see we have another question from Aaron Shafkine. I'm actually responding to your question right now. Aaron asked, would you consider applying to the Creative Advantage? This is a joint thing with the city and Seattle Public Schools. Would love to bring you into my school and do an online talk of some kind. Actually, Aaron, I would love to try to get some type of program going on with Seattle schools. So if you can, please email me at mark@chop.art, mark@chop.art, or you can or you can email chop.art. Uh, Henry, do you also mind muting your mic? It looks like we're getting a little bit of interference, something on your mic there. Awesome, thank you. Let's see. Do we have any more questions? I don't see any here. All right. Um, so once again, I want to take the moment to thank everybody for coming in and being a part of Chop Art's first digital program. This has been months in the making, guys. It took a lot of hard work and it took a lot of effort from a lot of different people coming together that really didn't know each other before Chop of last year. So I'd like to take the moment to give a special thanks to, of course, the Museum of History and Industry for hosting this event through their website. Thank you. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. They've been very helpful in helping us throughout this entire process. 12th Ave Arts, right there in the area that was known as CHOP. They have been very helpful. The Black Heritage Society of Seattle, and all of the artists for taking the time out of their days to not only be a part of this movement by painting the art, but also to come back, sit down with us, and share their experiences, their visions, and what this art meant to them with the rest of us. So thank all of you guys. And of course, last but not least, everyone at Chop Art and everyone who participated at Chop in the fight for equality for all. Thank you guys. Um, I'm sure everyone has, more questions about the Chop Art and what we're going to be doing in the future. I would encourage you all to follow our new social media. It'll be the official Chop Art. Please find us on all major platforms, the official Chop Art. You can also email us once again if you have any questions at info@chop.art. We are going to be looking at for ways to further partner with the city, including installing art in Cal Anderson in some form. We are currently still trying to contact as many artists we can to continue to be a part of the Chop Art in the future. We are looking into making calendars for those of us who would like to have a little calendar of the Chop sitting on their coffee table at home or on a wall or wherever you would like to put it. We want to do that as well. And we also have a potential Chop anniversary that we are looking and holding during the summertime. So hopefully we can get all these events to come through, and hopefully we can make it through this pandemic and be able to enjoy some time outside together and reimagining the Chop. So thank you guys all once again for joining us today. I'd like to leave it over to Rachel to see if she has anything further to say.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to give a big thank you. Thank you, Mark Anthony, for the wonderful moderation and doing those interviews, drawing out those stories. And thank you so much to Henry, Perry, Sakura, and John, and Corinne, who was not here but gave the wonderful filmed interview, for sharing your art with us and the stories behind the art. That was just really powerful. And I'm so glad this is recorded so that I can go back and listen. And for all of you here, we will be sending the link. I encourage you to send it to those who weren't able to be here, because this is just so powerful. And I hope that the message gets out. And we look forward to getting to see what Chop Art does next. And we're so glad at Mohai to have had the chance to work with you on this project. So thank you. And I just want to give a shout out for our next program that's coming up in about 2 weeks. We're going to be continuing to think about civics and what is next in our democracy. So we're going to be looking at our political landscape post-pandemic and what comes next for our city, and using history as a lens, reflecting on what happened to Seattle post-1918 pandemic, and how that impacted politics, and then doing a little bit of future gazing of what that might mean for us next. And so that's on February 13th at 4 p.m. Please come join us again in our virtual space. And as always, if you learned something new or enjoy the work we are doing during this unprecedented time in history, please consider making a gift or becoming a member to support future programs like this one and to help sustain the museum beyond this unforeseen closure. So thank you so much. I hope that everyone stays safe and healthy and continues to find ways to stay engaged and learn more. And we're happy to see you in the Zoom room. Hope to see you soon. And thank you so much for coming out. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel.